You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
Should have killed her. Everybody knows you're alive. Everybody knows you're alive.
Had to do it over again, I'd kill more.
In the dark corridors of American history, few names raise as much fear and disgust as the Ku Klux Klan. Founded in the aftermath of the Civil War, this hate group has kept alive a legacy of violence, racism, and terror. For over a century, the Klan has operated from the shadows.
We aim to pull evil up by the root before it chokes out the flower of our culture and heritage.
Its members concealed in facelessness, its actions hidden in secrecy. What happens when these faceless criminals are finally brought into the light of justice? What justifications do they offer? And how do their reactions reflect their deep-seated beliefs? Join us as we unravel 15 KKK members reacting to life sentences. Number 15. Frazier Glenn Miller. In Overland Park, Kansas, the calmness of 2014 was shattered by an act of terror that hit close to home. Frazier Glenn Miller Jr., a former member of the Ku Klux Klan, whose life had been soaked in white supremacist beliefs, committed a horrific hate crime that sent shockwaves across the nation. As the Johnson County District Court reverberated with the weight of his life sentence, Miller's reaction was not one of remorse, but of unrepentant rage. Born in 1940, Miller's life was a breeding ground for racist propaganda and wild conspiracy theories. In the early 1980s, he founded the Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, a group that later transformed into the White Patriot Party. His organizations were notorious for their paramilitary activities and aggressive intimidation tactics against minority communities, eventually leading to legal troubles and a federal court order that barred his paramilitary operations. His rallying cry was clear: one God, one race, and one nation. So help us God Almighty. White power. On April 13, 2014, in Overland Park, Kansas, Miller set his deadly plan into motion. He drove to the Jewish Community Center of Greater Kansas City, where families were gathered for a youth singing competition. Without warning, he opened fire, killing 14-year-old Reet Underwood and his grandfather, Dr. William Corporon. His rampage continued as he made his way to Village Shalom, a nearby retirement community, where he took the life of Terry Lamano. The attack, which happened just a day before Passover, was a chilling hate crime. Witnesses reported that Miller asked his victims if they were Jewish before shooting them. After the shootings, he was apprehended near an elementary school, shouting anti-Hebrew insults and screaming, "Heil Hitler," as he was taken into custody. In 2015, Miller was charged with capital murder and attempted murder. Representing himself in court, he showed no remorse, using the trial as a platform to spew his hateful ideology. The emotionally charged trial ended with Miller being found guilty on all charges, including capital murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. When the verdict was read, Miller responded with confrontation, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Number 14. David Elliott Moran and Charles Thomas Newcomb. In Columbia County, a jury found David Elliott Moran, 49, of Lake Butler, and Charles Thomas Newcomb, 45, of Interlaken, guilty of conspiring to commit first-degree murder. The target of their 2015 plot was an inmate who, after being released from prison, moved to Palatka and fortunately remained unharmed. This threatening plan was a twisted act of revenge coming from a violent altercation between the inmate and another guard named Thomas Jordan Driver. Driver claimed that during a fight at a Department of Corrections facility in Lake Butler in early 2015, the inmate bit him, potentially exposing him to AIDS and hepatitis. The plan was uncovered thanks to a confidential FBI informant who became aware of the conspiracy after meeting Moran, Driver, and Newcomb at a Ku Klux Klan meeting in late 2014. Newcomb was identified as the ringleader, while Moran and Driver expressed their deadly intentions to have the inmate buried 6 feet under. Both Moran and Driver were employed by the state corrections system, while Newcomb was a former corrections officer. Thomas Driver ultimately pleaded guilty to 1 count of murder conspiracy and received a 4-year prison sentence. Charles Newcomb and David Moran, both members of the Ku Klux Klan and prison employees, were convicted of plotting to kill the black inmate after his release from a Northeast Florida prison. Number 13. Benton Byer. According to reports, a horrifying incident happened when a man named Benton Byer deliberately crashed a stolen SUV into the home of Andrea and Philippe Robinson. The police revealed that Byer had placed a large granite slab on the gas pedal, sending the vehicle straight into the Robinsons' residence. This terrifying moment was caught on a Ring camera. The Robinson family was left in a state of shock and disbelief. "I'm still in shock," Andrea expressed. "Every day I come out here, hoping it's just a bad dream. My wife and children don't want to stay here, and I completely understand." However, this was not the first time the Robinsons had been targeted by Byer. The trouble began when the Robinsons posted a video addressing racism and displayed a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard. In retaliation, Byer vandalized their property, smashing the windows of Andrea and her daughter's cars. "I try to tell the world what my kids are going through," Andrea shared. "We wake up to find our car windows shattered, again and again." The situation escalated, leading the Robinsons to file a restraining order against Byer. But it didn't stop him. Over the course of more than 80 days, the harassment intensified. Byer went from breaking windows to shooting at security cameras, and even tracking Andrea's movements closely enough to follow her to grocery stores. Desperate, Andrea took to social media, pleading for help. "He's been stalking us every day for the past 83 days. I need everyone watching this video to contact the county prosecutor's office and the media, because we are willing to speak out." Byer was finally arrested after a neighbor reported him to the authorities. He was charged with stalking, harassment, first-degree property damage, and second-degree assault. Ultimately, Benton Byer was sentenced to 105 months in prison, with a requirement to serve at least 70 months before being eligible for parole. Number 12. Edgar Ray Killen. Edgar Ray Killen was an influential organizer for the Ku Klux Klan in America, notorious for organizing the brutal 1964 murders of 3 civil rights activists, Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney. Alongside a group of armed men, including the deputy sheriff of Neshoba County, Killen carefully planned and executed the evil act. Despite the gravity of the crime, Mississippi's state authorities made little effort to bring the perpetrators to justice. It wasn't until then, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy and the FBI launched a thorough investigation that the case began to gain traction. In 1966, an all-white jury convened at the Meridian Federal Courthouse, where 7 conspirators were convicted, while 8 others, including Killen, were acquitted. For over 2 decades, justice seemed baffling until investigative journalist Jerry Mitchell took on the case. Over 6 years, Mitchell's relentless work, which included uncovering new evidence and locating fresh witnesses, breathed new life into the investigation. Mitchell's dedication led to a revival of national interest in the case. He developed a website, lobbied Congress, and drew significant media attention, all in an effort to bring the perpetrators to justice. With the help of high school teacher Barry Bradford and 3 Illinois students, Mitchell managed to secure Killen's only recorded interview about the murders. In the interview, Killen appeared unrepentant, firmly holding on to his racialist beliefs. Eventually, Killen was convicted of 3 counts of manslaughter in state court and sentenced to 60 years in prison, beginning his sentence in June 2005. In a surprising twist, Killen appealed his conviction, claiming that he was physically incapacitated, unable to use his right hand, and confined to a wheelchair. He was released on a $600,000 appeal bond, but his freedom was short-lived. A deputy sheriff later spotted him moving around freely, leading to his return to prison. The Mississippi Supreme Court upheld Killen's conviction in August 2007 and he remained behind bars until his death in 2018. Number 11. Brenton Tarrant. On March 15, 2019, Brenton Tarrant executed a carefully organized attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch during Friday evening prayers. Wearing a helmet-mounted camera, he chillingly live-streamed part of his assault on Facebook. As he drove towards the Al-Noor Mosque, heavily armed and seemingly unfazed, he strolled towards the mosque while stunned passers-by looked on in horror. Upon reaching the entrance, Tarrant, clad in black from head to toe, including a helmet and bulletproof vest, opened fire without mercy. He unleashed a flood of bullets during the packed prayer service, killing at least 41 men, women, and children within just 2 minutes. During this brief but deadly onslaught, Tarrant fired 144 rounds. After this initial massacre, he drove to the Linwood Islamic Center, laughing and making comments as he continued his rampage. 7 more innocent lives were claimed there, but Tarrant wasn't finished. His next target was another mosque. However, before he could carry out further atrocities, police rammed his car and arrested him. In total, 51 people lost their lives, and 40 others were wounded, most of whom were from Islamic backgrounds. During his trial, the prosecution argued that Tarrant's ultimate goal was to eradicate non-Europeans and immigrants, aiming to instill fear in those he deemed invaders, particularly the Muslim community and other non-European immigrants. Eventually, Tarrant pleaded guilty to all charges, which included 51 counts of murder, attempted murder, and terrorism. At his sentencing, emotional family members of the victims confronted him directly. One described him as a loner, a big fat loser, a coward, and a pathetic human being, while another condemned him as trash of society. In a landmark ruling, Tarrant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the first time such a sentence was ever handed down in New Zealand. For each of the 51 murder charges, he received life imprisonment with no chance of release. Number 10. Harry Rogers. Harry Rogers, a self-proclaimed leader of the Ku Klux Klan, was sentenced to 6 years in prison after being found guilty of multiple evil deeds. The 37-year-old Rogers was convicted on 6 counts, including 4 instances of assault and battery, 1 charge of failing to stop after an accident, and 1 count of property damage. He is still facing 3 felony charges for attempted poisonous wounding, for which he has not yet entered an appeal. The incident in question occurred when Rogers recklessly drove his pickup truck onto the median of a local road, where protesters were demonstrating. As he approached the crowd, he high-speed his engine aggressively and drove into the group. Although no one was killed or severely injured, 3 people sustained injuries in the attack. The protesters were advocating against racism and police brutality, sparked by the death of George Floyd. This protest in Virginia was part of a broader wave of demonstrations that spread across the nation in the wake of Floyd's death. Rogers had openly admitted his association with the Ku Klux Klan and had even bragged about it on social media. When law enforcement officers investigated his home and vehicle, they found evidence of his Klan membership, including a KKK robe, a Klan Bible, a white power flag, and several weapons and ammunition. Although Rogers was also charged with 4 hate crimes, the judge ruled that these charges did not apply, as the victims were white. Number 9. Dean Capsulis. In the serene town of Belmont, Massachusetts, a seemingly minor road rage incident between 2 drivers erupted into a heartbreaking saga of hatred and sorrow. This shocking event not only disrupted the calmness of this peaceful community, but also led to the tragic death of Henry Tapia. On a cold January day in 2021, Belmont's quiet streets became the scene of a deadly confrontation. Henry Tapia, a 34-year-old black man, was driving through his neighborhood, unaware that his day was about to take a tragic turn. According to the police, the confrontation began with a minor traffic infraction. Capsulis failed to signal a turn. This seemingly small lapse angered Tapia, leading to a heated exchange between the 2 men. The argument took a darker turn when Capsulis uttered a racial insult against Tapia. In a shocking escalation, Capsalis then got back into his pickup truck, gazed up the engine, and deliberately accelerated towards Tapia. The collision was both immediate and catastrophic. Tapia was struck by the truck and sustained injuries that, despite the swift response from emergency services, proved fatal. He passed away shortly after the incident. Instead of staying at the scene, Capsalis fled, but later turned himself in to the authorities, a move that would be scrutinized throughout the trial. Capsalis's fiancée defended him, claiming Tapia had threatened Capsalis first and arguing that although the racial insult was inappropriate, it was not the catalyst for Capsalis's actions. The judge sentenced Capsalis to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years, a penalty deemed appropriate for the severity of the crime. Number 8. Ahmaud Arbery. In the peaceful community of Satilla Shores, Georgia, an event happened that would shock the entire nation and spark a heated debate about race, justice, and vigilantism. On February 23, 2020, the quiet of the neighborhood was shattered when Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, went out for a jog and was tragically killed. The men responsible for this act, Gregory McMichael, his son Travis McMichael, and their neighbor William Rod Bryan, claimed they suspected Arbery of burglary. Gregory McMichael, a 64-year-old retired police officer and former investigator for the Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney's Office, first spotted Arbery from his front yard. Armed with a .357, Gregory, along with his 34-year-old son Travis, who also had law enforcement experience and carried a shotgun, pursued Arbery in their white pickup truck. They believed they recognized Arbery from security camera footage circulated among the neighbors, which showed a man wandering near a house under construction. Despite the footage suggesting that this man was indeed suspicious, there was no evidence linking Arbery to any crimes. The McMichaels decided to take matters into their own hands. Their pursuit ended violently when Travis McMichael exited the truck with his shotgun. A struggle ensued between him and Arbery, which resulted in 3 gunshot wounds to Arbery. Despite admitting to chasing and confronting Arbery, no arrests were made that day. The McMichaels claimed they were acting in self-defense while trying to make a citizen's arrest. The case only gained widespread attention after 2 months, when a video of the shooting, recorded by Bryan, was leaked. The footage revealed the fatal encounter and led to the arrest of the McMichaels, who were charged with murder and aggravated assault. Bryan was also charged for his role in the chase and recording. Ultimately, Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, and William Rod Bryan were found guilty of murder in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. The McMichaels were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years. Bryan received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Number 7. Joe Torres and Kayla Norton. Kayla Norton and Jose Torres, both affiliated with the white racist group Respect the Flag, have been sentenced for their involvement in a horrifying attack on an 8-year-old black child's birthday party in Georgia. This incident, which took place on July 2015, was marked by racial allegations, threats involving firearms, and the display of Confederate battle flags. Norton, Torres, and other members of their group went on a racist rampage fueled by alcohol in Douglas and Paulding counties, located west of Atlanta. This occurred just a month after a racially motivated shooter had murdered 9 people at a historic black church in Charleston, South Carolina. The group also targeted black drivers and then arrived at the birthday party, where they unleashed their anger. Phone footage from the attack shows police trying to shield the families while the attackers' trucks sprint away. In response, a grand jury in Douglas County indicted the Respect the Flag organization as a street gang. Superior Court Judge William Bo McLean sentenced Torres to 13 years in prison, followed by 7 years of probation. Norton received a sentence of 6 years in prison and 9 years of probation. Both individuals are also prohibited from entering Douglas County as part of their sentences. Number 6. William Melendez. On January 28, 2015, a troubling incident involving Detroit police officer William Melendez came to light. During a routine patrol stop, Melendez encountered 57-year-old Floyd Dent on Inkster Road, Michigan. The dashcam footage from the police car captured the disturbing event. Dent was initially pulled over for ignoring a stop sign. As Melendez approached, his gun was aimed at Dent, and his partner forcefully removed Dent from the vehicle and threw him to the ground. Despite Dent's immediate surrender, Melendez escalated the situation by putting him in a chokehold while his partner restrained him. What followed was shocking. Melendez began to repeatedly punch Dent in the head, delivering a total of 16 blows before choking him into unconsciousness. Backup officers arrived, and nearly 6 officers struggled to handcuff the battered Dent, who remained in Melendez's chokehold. Once Dent was finally restrained and bloodied, officers began searching his car. Dash cam footage inside the police vehicle revealed Dent crying from a swollen eye. Although Dent was initially charged with cocaine possession, those charges were later dropped. The focus shifted to Melendez, who was arrested and charged with misconduct and assault. During the trial, Dent took the stand and recounted his horrifying experience. He described how Melendez, with his gun drawn, threatened him, and how the officer then brutally attacked him once he was on the ground. Ultimately, Melendez was found guilty of all charges. During his sentencing, he apologized to Dent and his family, claiming that it was never his intention to cause harm or foster hatred towards law enforcement. However, the judge was unsympathetic, condemning Melendez for misusing his authority and causing significant distress to Dent and his family. Melendez was sentenced to a prison term ranging from 13 months to 10 years for his actions. Now it's time for today's subscriber's pick. Imagine a dimly lit courtroom where the tension is visible, the air thick with the weight of what's about to happen. The seats are filled with anxious faces, some hoping for justice, others for a miracle. The camera pans across the room, capturing the sweat beading on foreheads, the nervous glances exchanged among a group of men clad in civilian clothes, but whose pasts are stained with the terror of the Ku Klux Klan. Among them sits a man whose name strikes fear and outrage, Frazier Glenn Miller, a man whose history is a chilling reminder of the darkest corners of humanity. The scene shifts as the judge enters, and the room falls into a strange silence. All eyes are on Miller, a man who once believed he was untouchable, now awaiting his fate. As the verdict is read, emotions erupt in the courtroom. Some gasp in disbelief, while others stare blankly, unable to process the magnitude of what's just happened. As the camera zooms on Miller's face, he responded with confrontation, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. What drives someone like Miller to do this criminal act, knowing the consequences could be so severe? And now that they're facing life sentences, do they feel any remorse? Or is there a part of them that are still attached to the twisted ideologies that brought them here? Number 5. Matthew Wayne Shepard. Matthew Wayne Shepard was a young gay American university student whose life took a tragic turn when he was brutally beaten, tortured, and left for dead. Rescuers rushed him to Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. But despite their efforts, Matthew succumbed to his severe head injuries 6 days later. In the aftermath of this horrific crime, 2 suspects, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, were swiftly arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The case gained widespread media attention, largely due to the belief that Matthew's sexual orientation played a significant role in the motive behind the crime. The prosecution argued that the attack on Matthew was intentional and driven by greed. In contrast, McKinney's defense claimed that the intention was merely to rob Matthew, but the situation escalated into murder when Matthew allegedly made a sexual advance. Matthew's murder sparked a national and international outcry, drawing significant attention to the need for stronger hate crime legislation at both state and federal levels. Both McKinney and Henderson were ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison for their roles in Matthew's death. In the wake of this tragedy, Judy Shepard, Matthew's mother, emerged as a passionate gay rights activist. She founded the Matthew Shepard Foundation, dedicated to promoting acceptance and equality for the LGBTQ+ community. Matthew's story has since inspired a multitude of creative works, including films, novels, plays, and songs, all commemorating his life and the impact of his death on the fight for equal rights. Number 4. Patrick Wood Crusius. On the morning of August 3, 2019, a 21-year-old man from Allen, Texas, embarked on a journey that would end in unspeakable tragedy. Patrick Wood Crusius drove over 600 miles to El Paso, armed not only with a semi-automatic rifle, but also with a manifesto filled with hatred. Crusius held extremist views and a deep-seated resentment toward immigrants. In his manifesto, he chillingly declared, "This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. They are the instigators, not me. I am simply defending my country from cultural and ethnic replacement brought on by an invasion." As the morning unfolded, shoppers at the Cielo Vista Walmart, a bustling store near the Mexican border, went about their daily routines, unaware of the impending horror. Crusius, armed and resolute, entered the store just before 10:30 a.m. local time. Within moments, the calm corridor of the store was shattered by the sound of gunfire, transforming a place of everyday commerce into a scene of unimaginable chaos and mass destruction. The store manager's quick-thinking active shooter alert initiated a rapid evacuation as customers and employees scrambled for safety. First responders arrived within 6 minutes, a swift action that likely prevented an even greater loss of life. Crusius was apprehended without resistance at a nearby intersection, his rampage leaving 23 people dead and 22 others injured. Among the victims were American, Mexican, and German nationals. Authorities quickly charged Patrick Wood Crusius with capital murder, and federal officials launched a hate crime investigation, given the clear racial motivations detailed in his manifesto. As the case advanced, Crusius ultimately pleaded guilty to 90 federal charges, including hate crimes and firearms offenses, thereby avoiding a potential death sentence. Instead, he was sentenced to 90 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, ensuring that justice would be served for his evil acts. Number 3. Michael Amantulo. Michael Amantulo, a 60-year-old man from Oregon, is facing serious hate crime charges after a disturbing incident in Portland. According to reports, Amantulo allegedly directed racist allegation at a 7-year-old African-American child in their apartment complex. When the child's 14-year-old brother stepped in to defend him, Amantulo didn't stop. He turned his racial abuse on the older boy as well. But it didn't end there. Amantulo allegedly threatened to physically assault the boys. He then went inside his apartment, returning with a butcher knife, which he threateningly pointed at the children from about 6 or 7 feet away. Fearing for their lives, the boys ran and hid under a nearby stairwell, where the older brother called the authorities for help. Police arrived on the scene and arrested Amantulo, charging him with criminal act bullying, second-degree intimidation, and unlawful use of a weapon. In court, the 7-year-old bravely testified, recounting how Amantulo's threats, particularly about killing his mother, deeply saddened him. The boy expressed his sorrow, explaining that his mother was pregnant with his first sister, and he feared for her safety. Judge Christopher Ram addressed the seriousness of the situation, noting the emotional impact on the young child. He emphasized that a 7-year-old would typically look up to an adult with trust, not expect to be met with such hateful language and threats. The judge highlighted how this traumatic experience could leave a lasting impression on the two children, as many African Americans vividly remember the first time they were targeted with a racial insult. Ultimately, Amantulo was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 3 years in prison, 2 years behind bars, and 1 year in jail. Number 2. Richard Preston. Richard Preston, a 52-year-old man with a history of involvement in far-right activities, was arrested following a shocking incident during a chaotic protest. The event happened when the ACLU of Virginia captured a video showing Preston, visibly agitated, flaunting a pistol in the midst of a heated confrontation with counter-protesters. As tensions escalated, Preston drew his weapon, shouted a racial insult, and marched towards the crowd, his actions reflecting the intense hostility of the scene. In a moment of alarming intensity, Preston lowered his gun and fired a shot into the ground, a move that could have easily resulted in serious injuries or even fatalities. Fortunately, no one was harmed by the gunfire, but the incident sent shockwaves through the crowd and drew immediate attention from law enforcement. The video quickly went viral, adding to the mounting concerns about the rising violence at protests across the country. Authorities wasted no time in charging Preston with discharging a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school, a grave offense that carries a potential prison sentence of up to 10 years. The location of the incident, near an educational institution, only heightened the severity of the charge. During the trial, Preston's past involvement with extremist groups was brought to light, further complicating his defense. The court ultimately sentenced him to 4 years in prison, a decision that sparked debate over whether the punishment was sufficient, given the potential danger his actions posed. The case became a focal point in discussions about the increasing presence of firearms at public demonstrations and the need for stricter enforcement of laws to prevent such incidents in the future. Number 1. Devin Arthurs. 18-year-old Devin Arthurs, along with his 4 roommates, belonged to a neo-Nazi group known as the Atomwaffen Division. However, Arthur's life took a dramatic turn when he converted to Islam, a choice that starkly contrasted with his previous extremist beliefs. This sudden shift in faith led to rising tensions within the group, as his roommates frequently mocked him for abandoning his neo-Nazi roots. On May 19, 2017, these tensions reached a breaking point. Arthurs, feeling cornered and angered, fatally shot 2 of his roommates, 22-year-old Jeremy Himmelman and 18-year-old Andrew Onshuk, inside their Tampa apartment. He later claimed that the reason for the murders was his roommate's relentless ridicule over his conversion to Islam. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they uncovered chilling arms of evidence, including explosive materials, weapons, and other bomb-making substances. Arthurs was promptly arrested, and during interrogation, he revealed the evil intentions of his remaining roommates. According to him, they had been planning devastating bombings as part of a delusional quest to establish a Fourth Reich. Arthurs insisted that his violent actions were an attempt to prevent this catastrophic plot. During his interrogation, Arthurs also opened up about his own struggles with mental health. He confessed, "I'm very prone to getting angry, to the point where I think I might be kind of sick in that sense." In court, he expressed remorse and claimed to be a changed man, now determined to fight against extremism. Ultimately, Arthurs was convicted of 2 reduced charges of second-degree murder and sentenced to 45 years in Florida State Prison, with a minimum mandatory of 25 years. What do you think should be the fate of those who spread hate and violence in our society? Should justice be served swiftly, or is there more to consider in the pursuit of accountability? Share your thoughts and comments below.